My name is Darren Halloway, and I've learned that the most dangerous weapon in corporate America isn't a lawsuit or a hostile takeover. It's a wife who thinks she's smarter than you. I discovered this truth on a Tuesday morning in October, sitting in my home office while Mira practiced her speech for the company Gala. She stood before our bedroom mirror, gesturing at her reflection like she was addressing the United Nations instead of a bunch of suits who'd sell their mothers for quarterly bonuses. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the mirror, "tonight we celebrate not just our company's future, but the vision of our mysterious new owner." Mysterious new owner. That phrase had been floating around Pinnacle Dynamics for 3 months now, ever since Evelyn Crane bought controlling interest in the company where Mira worked as head of public relations. Nobody knew much about Crane except that she had money, connections, and a reputation for cleaning house with surgical precision. I sipped my coffee and watched Mira rehearse. At 36, she still turned heads when she walked into a room. Auburn hair that caught light like copper wire, green eyes that could freeze or charm depending on her mood, and a smile she wielded like a scalpel. She'd used that smile to climb from junior account executive to department head in 5 years. Now she was aiming higher. "The Metropolitan Museum's Renaissance Hall provides the perfect backdrop," she continued, adjusting her posture, "for an evening that will reshape our industry." The Renaissance Hall. I'd proposed to her there 8 years ago, back when she thought my software consulting business was charming instead of embarrassing. Back when she introduced me as my brilliant husband instead of avoiding introductions altogether. My phone buzzed with a text from Ravi Patel, my attorney and best friend since college. "Coffee later? Need to discuss the proxy paperwork." I typed back, "Standing by." Mira's voice grew louder, more confident. "Tonight, we honor excellence, vision, and the courage to make difficult decisions." Difficult decisions, like the one she'd made 6 weeks ago when she started working late every Tuesday and Thursday. Like the decision to password protect her laptop. Like the decision to move our joint savings into an account I couldn't access. I'd hired a private investigator, not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm thorough. The photos arrived last Friday. Mira and Julian Firth, the company's chief operating officer, sharing intimate dinners at the Grandview Hotel. Julian with his Harvard MBA, his corner office, and his habit of calling people like me blue-collar adjacent. But the photographs were just confirmation. The real evidence sat in my safe. Months of financial records showing how Mira had been funneling consulting contracts through a personal LLC, how she'd been skimming vendor payments, how she and Julian had been positioning themselves for a merger that would make them both very wealthy. "Darren," Mira's sharp voice cut through my thoughts, "are you even listening?" "Every word," I said, looking up from my laptop. "Very inspiring." She studied my face, searching for sarcasm. After 8 years of marriage, she'd developed decent radar for it. "I need you to understand how important tonight is. Evelyn Crane will be there. Board members, department heads. This could change everything for us." "For us?" "For our future." She smoothed her skirt and checked her reflection again. "Julian thinks I'm being considered for a promotion. Something big, Julian thinks. Not I heard or someone mentioned, Julian thinks. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore." "That's wonderful," I said. "I should probably start getting ready." Mira's expression shifted, like a door slamming shut. "Actually, about that, there's been a change." I waited. The guest list got complicated. Space constraints. "You understand?" "I don't, actually." She turned away from the mirror, and for the first time in months, she looked directly at me. "Darren, this is a corporate event. High level. The kind of thing where spouses need to fit in. Fit in. You know what I mean." I did know. I knew exactly what she meant. My background wasn't polished enough for her new crowd. My state school education wasn't impressive enough. My consulting business, successful as it was, didn't carry the prestige she needed. So, you're uninviting me. I'm being practical. Her voice took on that patient tone she used when explaining obvious things to slow children. This isn't about us. It's about positioning. Optics. Optics. Julian will be there with his wife, board members, investors. These people expect a certain presentation. And I don't present well. You present fine for what you are. The words hung in the air like smoke. But tonight isn't about what you are. It's about what I need to become. I closed my laptop and stood up. What you need to become. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not making anything hard, Mira. I'm just trying to understand. Are you telling me I'm an embarrassment? I'm telling you that some opportunities require sacrifice. Your sacrifice or mine? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I walked to the window and looked out at our neighborhood. Upper middle class, nice lawns, 2-car garages. The kind of place where people worked hard and played by the rules and thought success meant having enough money to send their kids to good colleges. It used to be enough for both of us. Fine, I said without turning around. Enjoy the party. I heard her heels click across the hardwood floor, heard her gathering her things. At the bedroom door, she paused. This isn't personal, Darren. I almost laughed. Of course it is. Everything's personal. After she left, I sat in the silence for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Ravi, it's time. Time for what? To execute the proxy. A pause. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought about Mira practicing her speech, about Julian and his corner office, about being called blue-collar adjacent by people who couldn't change a tire or write a line of code if their lives depended on it. I'm sure. When? Tomorrow morning, before the market opens. Another pause. Darren, you realize what this means? If we trigger the proxy transfer and the supermajority clause, you'll essentially control the company overnight. I realize. And the internal audit? The one you commissioned 6 months ago? Release it the same morning. Full distribution. Board members, regulatory agencies, press contacts. The evidence about Mira's consulting contracts? Everything. Her relationship with Julian? Everything. Ravi was quiet for a moment. You know this will destroy her career. She destroyed it herself. I'm just providing the documentation. And Julian? Julian made his choices. All right. I'll have the paperwork ready by midnight. Proxy transfer executes at 6 a.m. Audit report goes out at 6:15. Perfect. Darren? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think she underestimated you. I looked around my home office, at the degrees on the wall, at the awards from tech companies, at the financial statements showing my silent partnership in Pinnacle Dynamics. 49% ownership, purchased quietly over 3 years through shell companies and private transactions. Everyone underestimated me, Ravi. That was the point. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and began typing an email. The recipients list included every board member, every department head, and every major shareholder at Pinnacle Dynamics. The subject line read, "Regarding tomorrow's shareholder proxy transfer and related audit findings." I didn't send it yet. That would wait until morning. Instead, I poured myself a scotch and settled in to watch the live stream of Mira's Gala. The Metropolitan Museum had set up cameras throughout the Renaissance Hall, providing multiple angles of the evening's festivities. I could see Mira near the entrance, greeting guests with that perfect smile, playing the role of gracious hostess. Julian appeared beside her, handsome in his tailored tuxedo. They stood close together, closer than colleagues should stand. Mira laughed at something he whispered, touching his arm in a gesture that looked casual but lasted too long. I took another sip of scotch and opened a second laptop. This one connected to a secure server where I'd been collecting evidence for months. Financial records, email transcripts, meeting recordings, bank statements showing payments from Mira's LLC to accounts she thought I didn't know about. The funny thing about being married to someone for 8 years is that you learn their patterns. Mira thought she was being clever, but she'd been sloppy, predictable. She used the same passwords, the same vendors, the same hotel for her meetings with Julian. My phone buzzed with a text from Janine Morrison, the museum's event coordinator and an old friend from college. "Watching the stream? Your wife looks stunning." I typed back, "She certainly does. How's the event going?" "Smoothly, though there's definitely some tension among the corporate folks. Lots of whispered conversations." "About what?" "Hard to say. Something about a merger, and everyone keeps asking about the mysterious new owner. Nobody seems to know much about this Evelyn Crane person." I smiled. Nobody knew much about Evelyn Crane because Evelyn Crane was a carefully constructed shell company. 3 layers of corporate entities, all leading back to a trust fund that led back to me. I'd been planning this for 2 years, ever since I realized Mira's ambition was bigger than her ethics. The shell companies, the proxy arrangements, the internal audit, even my friendship with Janine, all pieces of a puzzle that was about to come together. "Darren," Janine's next text read, "Everything okay? You're being unusually quiet." "Everything's perfect. Enjoy the party." On the live stream, I watched Mira take the stage. She looked radiant under the lights, confident and poised as she began her speech about vision and excellence, and the courage to make difficult decisions. She had no idea that in 8 hours her world would collapse. I raised my glass to the screen. "To difficult decisions, sweetheart." Then I opened my laptop and began typing the final details of tomorrow's execution plan. The Renaissance Hall looked like something from a movie, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the crowd of corporate executives and their perfectly dressed spouses. I watched through the live stream as Mira worked the room, her emerald dress catching the light every time she moved. She was in her element, commanding attention without seeming to try. I'd fallen in love with that confidence once. Now it just reminded me how easily she could manipulate a room full of supposedly smart people. My phone rang. Janine. "Hey," I answered. "Are you sure you're not coming tonight? I could probably sneak you in through the service entrance." I almost laughed. Janine had no idea how perfect her offer was, or how unnecessary. "Thanks, but I'm fine staying home. Mira seems different tonight, more intense than usual." Through the screen I could see what Janine meant. Mira moved through the crowd with purpose, stopping to whisper with board members, touching arms and leaning in close during conversations. She was working, building alliances for whatever play she and Julian had planned. "She's excited about her career prospects," I said. "Must be some prospects. Julian Firth has been glued to her side all evening." I switched camera angles and found them near the champagne fountain. Julian's hand rested on the small of Mira's back, a gesture that looked protective but screamed possession. His wife stood 10 feet away, talking to other spouses, oblivious or choosing to ignore what was happening behind her. "They work closely together," I said. "Uh-huh." Janine's tone suggested she wasn't buying it. "Well, if you change your mind about coming, text me. The loading dock stays open until midnight." After she hung up, I opened my secure laptop and began the final preparations. The proxy transfer documents were ready, electronically signed and waiting for Ravi's authentication at 6 a.m. The internal audit sat in my outbox, a 47-page document detailing every questionable transaction Mira had authorized over the past 18 months. But the real weapon was simpler. A spreadsheet showing payments from Pinnacle Dynamics to Meridian Consulting LLC, Mira's personal company, for services that were either unnecessary, overpriced, or never actually performed. She'd been stealing from the company for over a year, skimming money through inflated vendor contracts and phantom consulting fees. Small amounts at first, then larger as she grew confident. The total was approaching $200,000. On the live stream, Mira took the stage again. The crowd quieted as she approached the microphone, her smile radiant under the spotlights. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this extraordinary evening. Her voice carried perfectly through the hall's acoustics. Tonight, we celebrate not just our company's achievements, but our bright future under new leadership. Applause rippled through the crowd. I could see Julian near the front, clapping enthusiastically, his eyes fixed on Mira like she was the only person in the room. Change can be challenging, Mira continued, but with vision and courage, change becomes opportunity. Tonight, I'm honored to announce that Pinnacle Dynamics will be entering a new phase of growth and expansion. More applause. I leaned forward, interested despite myself. This wasn't part of her prepared speech. Over the coming weeks, you'll hear about exciting developments, new partnerships, strategic acquisitions, leadership transitions that will position us for unprecedented success. Leadership transitions. I pulled up my secure files and cross-referenced the dates. 3 weeks ago, Julian had submitted a merger proposal to the board. 2 weeks ago, Mira had incorporated a new consulting company. 1 week ago, they'd both taken out significant loans against their stock options. They were planning something big for tonight. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Halloway, this is Marcel from Museum Security. Ms. Morrison asked me to contact you. There's some unusual activity at tonight's event. Might be worth your attention. I stared at the message. Marcel had been museum security for 15 years, a former police detective who noticed things other people missed. If he was reaching out, something was wrong. I typed back, "What kind of activity?" "Private meeting in the VIP lounge. Your wife and several board members. Looks like they're conducting business." The VIP lounge was off limits during public events, accessible only to museum staff and special guests. If Mira had arranged a meeting there, she was planning something that couldn't wait until normal business hours. "Can you get me access to the loading dock?" Ms. Morrison already cleared it. Dock 3. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. I closed the laptop and grabbed my jacket. Whatever Mira was planning, I wanted to see it firsthand. The drive to the museum took 15 minutes through light traffic. The loading dock was exactly where Janine said it would be, tucked behind the main building where delivery trucks could unload without disturbing visitors. Marcel was waiting, a compact man in his 50s, with alert eyes and the kind of stillness that came from years of watching people lie to him. "Mr. Halloway." He shook my hand with a firm grip. "Janine says you're good people." "Janine's generous." "Maybe, but she's also smart, and she's worried about you." He led me through a service corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduits. The walls were concrete block, painted institutional green, a stark contrast to the marble and gold leaf in the public areas. "What exactly did you see?" I asked. "Your wife arranged for private access to the VIP lounge after her speech. Said it was for major donors who wanted to discuss future support." But the people she brought weren't donors. They were all from her company, board members, executives, that sort. And they brought lawyers. We reached a service elevator that Marcel operated with a security key. As we rose, he continued talking. "Been doing this job long enough to recognize a business meeting when I see one. They had documents spread across the table, laptops. Someone was taking notes." The elevator stopped at the 3rd floor, and Marcel led me down another corridor toward the VIP lounge. We could hear voices through the walls, muffled but animated. "There's a service room next door," Marcel whispered. "Shares a wall with the lounge. Sound carries." The service room was cramped, filled with folding chairs and audio equipment. The air smelled faintly of dust and warm electronics. Cables coiled like black vines across the floor, a single bare bulb buzzing overhead. Marcel shifted his weight carefully, mindful of the tight space and pointed to a section of wall where the voices were clearest, the plaster there thin and slightly cracked from age. I pressed my ear against the plaster and listened. The wall was cool against my cheek, vibrating faintly with sound, every word arriving muffled but distinct enough to follow. Merger vote needs to happen tonight. Julian's voice, tense with excitement, carried a sharp edge. We have 7 of 9 board members here. That's enough for a quorum. The documentation isn't complete. Another voice, older, cautious. Robert Chen, the board chairman. Even through the wall, his hesitation was unmistakable. The documentation is sufficient, Mira said. Her tone was crisp, professional, but I could hear the underlying tension, the subtle tightness beneath the polish. We've prepared everything necessary for an emergency vote. Emergency? Chen again. What's the emergency? Market conditions, Julian replied smoothly, confidence settling into his voice like a practiced suit. The acquisition window won't stay open indefinitely. If we wait for the next scheduled board meeting, we'll lose the opportunity. I pulled out my phone and started recording, keeping my movements slow and deliberate, the red indicator lighting up silently as I held it close to the wall. The proposed merger with Titan Industries would double our market share overnight, Mira continued. But it requires immediate action. Tonight's vote authorizes management to finalize terms and execute the agreement. And the current ownership structure? A woman's voice I didn't recognize cut in, measured but wary. Will be restructured as part of the merger, Julian said. Existing shareholders will receive compensation based on current market valuation. Current market valuation. The phrase landed heavily, familiar and infuriating, which was artificially low because they'd been manipulating quarterly reports to suppress the stock price. I'd seen the real numbers in the internal audit. Pinnacle Dynamics was worth twice what the official reports claimed, maybe more. What about minority shareholders? Chen asked. Protected under standard merger provisions, Mira replied. No one loses money. Everyone benefits from the increased valuation. Lies. All lies. The merger would trigger a buyout clause that would force small shareholders to sell at the manipulated price. Mira and Julian, with their advanced knowledge and stock options, would make millions, while everyone else got pennies on the dollar. I need to review the financial projections again, Chen said, his voice strained with reluctance. Of course. Mira's voice was smooth as silk. Julian has prepared detailed analyses showing the synergies and growth potential. Through the wall, I could hear papers rustling, chairs moving, the soft click of laptop keys. The meeting felt disturbingly real, dangerously close. They were actually going to do it. Vote on a merger in secret, in a museum VIP lounge, while the rest of the company celebrated downstairs, blissfully unaware. My phone vibrated with a text from Ravi. Proxy paperwork ready. Confirm execution time. I typed back, 6 a.m. sharp, no delays. What about the audit? Full distribution, board members first, then regulators. Copy that. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Through the wall, Julian was speaking again. Unanimous vote would send a strong message to Titan Industries, show them we're serious about moving forward. I'm comfortable with the proposal, said a voice I recognized as Patricia Webb, the CFO. The financial benefits are clear. Robert? Mira's voice pressed gently, insistently, waiting for Chen to tip the balance. A long pause, the kind that stretches thin, where you can almost hear someone thinking. Then, I'll support the motion. Excellent. Julian sounded triumphant, unable to hide it now. All in favor? A chorus of voices followed, overlapping and final. Aye. Motion carried unanimously. The merger with Titan Industries is approved, contingent on final due diligence and contract execution. I stopped recording and stepped away from the wall, my neck stiff, my jaw tight. They'd done it. Voted to sell the company in a secret meeting, using emergency provisions that probably violated 6 corporate governance rules. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd forgotten about the supermajority clause. Marcel was watching me carefully, reading my face in the dim light. Get what you needed? More than I needed. Good, because they're wrapping up in there. Through the wall, I could hear chairs scraping, papers being gathered, voices growing louder as the meeting broke up. Marcel led me back toward the service elevator, our footsteps muted against the concrete floor. But before we reached it, my phone rang. Janine. Darren, where are you? Why? Because Mira just asked me if I'd seen you tonight. She seemed concerned. I looked at Marcel, who was listening to both sides of the conversation. What did you tell her? That I hadn't seen you, but she's asking security to check the building. We need to leave, Marcel said quietly. Now. The elevator seemed to take forever. As we descended, I could hear footsteps in the corridor above, voices calling my name. They knew I was here. The loading dock was dark when we emerged, lit only by security lights that cast long shadows across the concrete. Marcel walked me to my car, his hand resting casually near his radio. Mr. Halloway? Yeah? I don't know what's going on between you and your wife, but be careful. People who hold secret meetings in museums usually have something to hide. I started my engine and rolled down the window. Thanks for the help. Thank Janine. She's the one who thought you should know. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from Mira. Where are you? Security said someone was in the building. This is important. Call me. Darren, I need to know where you are. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Ravi. Change of plans, I said when he answered. What kind of change? Move everything up. Execute the proxy at 5 a.m. instead of 6. Why? Because they just voted to sell the company. Emergency merger, secret vote, the whole thing. Ravi was quiet for a moment. That's probably illegal. Definitely illegal. But it won't matter if we don't act fast. 5 a.m. it is. Anything else? Yeah. Add the recording I just made to the audit package. Board members need to hear what their colleagues really think about corporate governance. Will do. Darren? Yeah? You realize this means war. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark for a moment, looking at the house I'd shared with Mira for 5 years. Tomorrow, everything would change. She'd wake up to find her career destroyed, her reputation ruined, her carefully laid plans in ashes. It was already war, Ravi. I'm just finally fighting back. I didn't sleep. At 4 a.m., I sat in my home office with 2 laptops open, 3 phones charging, and a pot of coffee that could strip paint. Outside, the city was still dark, but I could see the first hints of dawn creeping across the horizon. My secure email showed 17 new messages from Ravi, each one confirming another step in the process. Proxy documents filed with the state, shareholder notifications sent to the transfer agent, corporate governance lawyers standing by for the inevitable legal challenges. At 4:30, my phone rang. Mira. Where the hell are you? Her voice was sharp with panic. Home. Where else would I be? I've been calling all night. I turned off my phone, needed sleep. Were you at the museum? I paused, letting the silence stretch. Why would I be at the museum? I wasn't invited, remember? Security said what? Another pause. Nothing, never mind. How was the party? Fine. Good. Listen, I need to talk to you about something important. Can it wait? I'm working. No, it can't wait. This is about us, about our future. Our future. 24 hours ago, that phrase might have meant something. Now it just sounded like another manipulation. I'll be home in an hour, she said. We need to discuss some changes. What kind of changes? The kind that affect everything. She hung up before I could respond. I checked the time. 4:37 a.m. In 23 minutes, the proxy transfer would execute automatically. shifting control of Pinnacle Dynamics to a shell company I controlled through 3 layers of corporate entities. At 4:45, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcel. Thought you should know. Your wife left the museum with Julian Firth. They went to the Grandview Hotel. The Grandview, their usual spot. I wondered if they were celebrating their secret merger vote or planning their next move. Either way, they were about to get a very unpleasant surprise. At 5 a.m. exactly, my laptop chimed with an automated message. Proxy transfer executed successfully. Supermajority voting control confirmed. I owned Pinnacle Dynamics, not publicly, not obviously, but legally and completely. 49% direct ownership plus proxy control over another 26% of outstanding shares. Enough to override any board decision, fire any executive, or block any merger. My phone rang immediately. Ravi. It's done, he said, without preamble. Confirmed? Confirmed. The transfer agent is updating the corporate records now. You want me to notify the board? Not yet. Send the audit report first. Full distribution. To everyone? Everyone. Board members, department heads, regulatory agencies, financial press. I want this information public before they realize what happened. Copy that. Sending now. I opened my email and began typing. The message was simple, direct, and devastating. To the Board of Directors of Pinnacle Dynamics, effective immediately, the undersigned has executed a proxy transfer resulting in supermajority voting control of the corporation. This action was taken in response to serious governance violations discovered during an independent audit of company operations. Please find attached a comprehensive report detailing financial irregularities, unauthorized transactions, and potential criminal activity by senior management. Additional documentation is available upon request. The emergency merger vote conducted last evening at the Metropolitan Museum is hereby declared null and void due to procedural violations and lack of proper shareholder notification. A formal board meeting will be convened at 9 a.m. this morning to address these matters. Respectfully, Darren Halloway, majority shareholder. I hit send at 5:15 a.m. Then I sat back and waited for the chaos to begin. It didn't take long. At 5:23, my phone started ringing. Robert Chen, the board chairman. Darren, what the hell is going on? Good morning, Robert. I assume you received my email? I received something that makes no sense. You're claiming majority control of the company? Not claiming. Exercising. The proxy documents are legally binding and properly executed. Proxy documents? What proxy documents? The ones filed with the state 3 months ago. The ones your legal team should have reviewed during standard due diligence. Silence. Then, 3 months ago? August 15th, to be precise. Right after the quarterly board meeting where you approved expanded proxy voting rights for minority shareholders. More silence. I could practically hear the gears turning in Chen's head as he realized what had happened. The board had approved the proxy provisions as a routine matter, never imagining that someone might actually use them. The audit report, Chen said finally. These allegations about Mira are fully documented with supporting evidence. Bank records, email transcripts, vendor invoices, the works. And the merger vote? Violated corporate governance rules in approximately 12 different ways. No proper notice, no shareholder approval, no regulatory filing. It's worthless. My phone was buzzing with incoming calls. Patricia Webb, Julian Firth, 3 other board members. I let them all go to voicemail. Darren, Chen said carefully, I think we need to meet. 9 a.m., conference room A, full board attendance required. And Mira? We'll be there to answer questions about the audit findings. What about Julian? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Julian will be busy with other matters. After Chen hung up, I opened my second laptop and began the next phase. Julian's corporate credit cards canceled. His building access revoked. His company car reported to security as unauthorized use. Small things, but effective. By the time he woke up, Julian would find himself locked out of his own office. At 6 a.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number. Mr. Halloway, this is Agent Sarah Mitchell with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We've received some disturbing information about Pinnacle Dynamics. Agent Mitchell, I've been expecting your call. You have? I sent the information myself, along with supporting documentation and a formal complaint about potential securities fraud. I see. Would you be available for an interview this morning? Absolutely, but I'd recommend speaking with the board of directors first. They're going to have a very interesting meeting at 9 a.m. After she hung up, I poured another cup of coffee and checked the financial news websites. Nothing yet, but that would change soon. The audit report contained enough explosive information to make headlines for weeks. At 6:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Janine. Something big happening at Pinnacle Dynamics. News vans outside their headquarters. Everything okay? I typed back, everything's perfect. At 7 a.m., I heard Mira's car in the driveway. She came through the front door like a hurricane, her dress wrinkled, her hair disheveled, her face pale with exhaustion, and something that looked like fear. Darren, she called. Darren, we need to talk right now. I stayed in my office, listening to her heels click across the hardwood floor as she searched the house. When she found me, she was breathing hard, clutching a stack of papers in her trembling hands. What did you do? She demanded. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Don't play games with me. What did you do? I gestured to the papers in her hands. I assume those are printouts of my email to the board? Your email? Your email? Her voice rose to nearly a shriek. You don't have any authority to send emails to the board. Actually, I do. Majority shareholders have considerable authority. Majority shareholder? You're not a majority shareholder. I turned my laptop around so she could see the screen. Corporate records, updated as of 5 a.m., showing my controlling interest in Pinnacle Dynamics. The color drained from her face. That's impossible, she whispered. Improbable, maybe, but not impossible. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. How? Very carefully, over 3 years, through shell companies and private transactions and a proxy structure your legal team approved without reading the fine print. You don't have that kind of money. I didn't, but my consulting business did very well, and I invested wisely. Amazing what you can accomplish when people underestimate you. Her phone started ringing. She ignored it. The audit report, she said. Those allegations are true, all of them. You had me investigated? I had the company investigated. You just happened to be stealing from it. The phone kept ringing, Julian's name on the display. Answer it, I said. What? Answer the phone. I'm curious what Julian has to say about your situation. With shaking hands, she accepted the call. Julian? Even from across the room, I could hear him shouting. Panic, rage, desperation, all mixed together in a voice that had lost its smooth confidence. Locked out of my office. My credit cards are canceled. Security won't let me in the building. I know, Mira said. I know. I got the email too. What email? What are you talking about? From Darren. Julian, he owns the company. Silence on the other end of the line. That's impossible, Julian said finally. That's what I said. We need to meet, right now. We need to figure out how to fix this. How to fix this. Mira looked at me, her eyes wide with something between terror and rage. Julian, he has documentation, bank records, email transcripts. He knows about the consulting contracts. He knows about what? Everything. He knows everything. More silence. Then Julian's voice, smaller now, defeated. We're finished. No, Mira said quickly. No, we can fight this, we can... The line went quiet. Julian had hung up. Mira stared at her phone for a long moment, then looked up at me. You planned this. I planned to protect my investment. Your investment? In the company, in our marriage, in the life we built together. I closed the laptop and stood up. You threw all of that away for Julian and his corner office and a merger that would have made you rich while destroying everyone else. I was trying to secure our future. You were trying to secure your future. I was never part of the plan. Her phone rang again. This time it was Robert Chen. Answer it, I said. She did, putting it on speaker. Mira? Chen's voice was formal, cold. I need you to come in immediately. Robert, I can explain. No explanations, just come in. Security will escort you to conference room A. Security? The board has voted to suspend you pending investigation of the audit findings. You can't do that. We can and we have. Your building access has been revoked. Your corporate accounts are frozen. You have 1 hour to collect personal items from your office, under security supervision. The line went quiet. Mira looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Complete, helpless defeat. 8 years, she whispered. What? 8 years of marriage. Did any of it mean anything to you? I thought about that question, about the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman who'd been ambitious but honest, driven but kind, the woman who'd celebrated my successes instead of being embarrassed by them. It meant everything, I said. That's why this hurts so much. Before she could respond, we heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the window, I could see a black sedan with government plates. That'll be Agent Mitchell from the SEC, I said. She'll want to interview you about the financial irregularities. You called the SEC? I called everyone. FBI Financial Crimes Unit, State Attorney General, IRS Fraud Division. Amazing how interested people become when you hand them a 47-page report documenting corporate theft. Mira sank into a chair, the papers falling from her hands to scatter across the floor. You've destroyed me. You destroyed yourself. I just documented it. The doorbell rang. Shall I get that? I asked. She didn't answer. I walked to the front door and opened it to find Agent Mitchell, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Behind her stood 2 other agents and Robert Chen. Mr. Halloway? Agent Mitchell, please come in. They filed into the living room, where Mira sat frozen in her chair. Mrs. Halloway? Agent Mitchell's voice was professional, but not unkind. We need to discuss some financial transactions involving Meridian Consulting, LLC. Mira looked up at me one last time. In her eyes, I saw the moment she finally understood what had happened. Not just the proxy transfer or the audit report, but the complete systematic destruction of everything she'd worked to build. How long? She whispered. How long what? How long have you been planning this? I thought about it. Since the first time you called me an embarrassment, since the first time you moved money without telling me, since the first time you chose Julian over me. Agent Mitchell cleared her throat. Mrs. Halloway, you have the right to remain silent. As the agents read Mira her rights, Chen approached me. The board would like to discuss your plans for the company, he said quietly. My plans are simple, I replied. Clean house. Replace corrupt management. Get back to the business of actually running a business instead of playing political games. And your role? I'll remain a silent partner, but not silent enough to let this happen again. Through the window, I watched as they led Mira to the government sedan. She didn't look back. Chen was still talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about 8 years of marriage, about trust and betrayal, about the difference between justice and revenge. Maybe there wasn't a difference after all. The Pinnacle Dynamics headquarters looked like a crime scene when I arrived at 8:30 a.m. News vans lined the street, reporters clustered around the main entrance, and security guards checked IDs with the intensity of Secret Service agents. I parked in the executive garage and took the private elevator to the 20th floor. The elevator required a special key card. one that I'd had Marcel program for me 6 months ago when I first started planning for this day. The executive floor was chaos. Assistants whispered in corners, phones rang unanswered, and through the glass walls of conference room A, I could see the board members gathered around a table covered with documents. Julian's office was dark, his nameplate already removed from the door. Security had been thorough. His personal items sat in cardboard boxes, ready for pickup. His degrees, his awards, his photos with industry leaders, all reduced to office debris. I knocked on the conference room door and entered without waiting for permission. "Gentlemen, ladies." I took the empty seat at the head of the table, the chair usually reserved for the CEO. "Thank you for coming on short notice." Robert Chen looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Darren, we need to discuss the situation with Mira." "What situation?" "The SEC has arrested her. They're calling it securities fraud." "I heard." "You heard. You're the one who provided the evidence." "I provided documentation of corporate theft. The SEC drew their own conclusions." Patricia Webb, the CFO, leaned forward. "The audit report you commissioned, how long have you known about these irregularities?" 6 months for the financial issues, 3 weeks for the merger conspiracy." "Merger conspiracy?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording from the museum. The board members' voices filled the room, discussing their secret vote, their plans to manipulate stock prices, their intention to force out minority shareholders. When it finished, the room was silent. "That recording was made without consent," said David Park, the company's general counsel. "In a public venue, during a corporate meeting that violated governance procedures, it's perfectly admissible. You recorded us secretly. I recorded you accurately." Chen rubbed his temples. "What do you want, Darren?" "I want the company to operate legally and ethically. I want management that prioritizes shareholders over personal enrichment. I want transparency instead of backroom deals." "And if we agree to these terms?" "Then we move forward. Clean slate, new leadership, proper governance." "And if we don't?" I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. The hinge creaked softly as the screen rotated, the familiar weight of the machine grounding my hands. Reflections from the conference room light slid across the glass before settling, and for a moment, the room seemed to lean forward as one. Breath held. On the screen was a draft press release titled, "Pinnacle Dynamics Board Authorizes Full Investigation of Corporate Corruption." Then I released this statement to every financial news outlet in the country, along with the complete audit report, the museum recording, and documentation of every questionable transaction from the past 2 years. The silence that followed felt dense, padded by the hum of the HVAC and the faint traffic far below. Webb went pale. The color drained from his cheeks so quickly it was almost startling, his lips parting as if he needed more air. That would destroy the company's reputation. The company's reputation is already destroyed. The question is whether we rebuild it or let it collapse completely. I kept my voice level, even as my pulse ticked harder in my ears. Across the table, a few board members avoided my eyes. Others watched me with a new, cautious attentiveness. My phone buzzed against the polished wood, sharp and intrusive. I glanced down, the screen lighting my palm with Marcel's name. "Julian Firth is in the lobby, demanding access to his office. Security has him contained, but he's making a scene." I showed the message to Chen, sliding the phone across the table so he could read it himself. "Shall we invite him up?" Chen's brow furrowed, his fingers steepling slowly. "Is that wise?" "Probably not, but it'll be entertaining." A few chairs shifted. Someone gave a short, nervous exhale. Chen nodded to security, the decision made with a small, resigned dip of his chin. 5 minutes stretched long and taut before footsteps thundered in the hall, uneven and hurried, and then Julian burst through the conference room door. He looked terrible. wrinkled clothes clinging to him like he'd slept in them, an unshaven face shadowed with stubble, eyes red with exhaustion and rage. His tie hung loose, crooked, as if it had been yanked down and forgotten. "You!" He pointed at me with a shaking finger, arm rigid, the rest of his body vibrating with barely contained fury. "You destroyed everything." "I documented everything. There's a difference." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. 3 years of work, 3 years of building relationships, developing strategies, positioning the company for growth. His words came fast, almost tumbling over each other, spittle flashing briefly at the corner of his mouth. 3 years of theft and manipulation. "I never stole anything!" His shout echoed off the glass walls, brittle and too loud. I opened another file on my laptop, the click of the trackpad precise, almost surgical. Columns of numbers filled the screen. Meridian Consulting LLC, phantom invoices for strategy sessions that never happened. $237,000 in payments over 18 months. Those were legitimate consulting fees. Julian's eyes flicked to the screen and away again, as if the figures themselves burned. "For what services?" I asked, tilting the laptop just enough for the nearest board members to see clearly. Julian's mouth opened and closed without sound. His jaw worked, a muscle jumping beneath the skin, but nothing came out. "The merger with Titan Industries," I continued, my tone steady as the words landed. "You negotiated a deal that would have netted you personally $12 million in stock options while forcing small shareholders to sell at artificially suppressed prices. That's business." He spread his hands, palms up, a gesture that begged agreement even as his eyes darted around the room. "That's fraud." Julian turned to the board members, desperation sharpening his voice. "Are you going to let him do this? He's a nobody, a small-time consultant who got lucky with some tech investments." "Actually," I said, closing the laptop with a soft, definitive click, "I'm the majority shareholder, which makes me your boss." "My boss?" The word came out thin, incredulous. "Well, your former boss. You're fired." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Julian stared at me, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally, desperate calculation. "You can't fire me. I have an employment contract." "Had an employment contract. It was voided when you violated the ethics clause." "What ethics clause?" I turned my laptop toward him. "Section 12, subsection 4. Prohibits conflicts of interest, self-dealing, and romantic relationships with other employees that could compromise professional judgment." Julian's face went white. "You can't prove—" "Hotel records from the Grandview. 18 visits over 6 months, always the same room, always charged to your corporate card. Credit card receipts for jewelry and flowers. Text messages between you and Mira discussing your future together." "Those messages are private. They were sent using company phones on company time. Corporate property." Julian looked around the room, searching for allies, finding none. The board members avoided his eyes. "This is personal," he said finally. "This is about your marriage, not the company. You made it about the company when you used it to steal money and manipulate stock prices. I never—" "The Meridian Consulting payments went directly to an account you and Mira controlled jointly. The merger proposal included provisions that would have triggered golden parachute clauses for both of you. The secret vote at the museum was designed to rush the deal through before anyone could examine the terms." Julian slumped into a chair. "We were protecting shareholder value. You were protecting your own interests. And what about your interests? You think this is about justice? You're just a jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife's success." The room went very quiet. I could hear the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic, the soft hum of fluorescent lights. "You're right," I said finally. "This is personal. My wife chose you over me. She chose your corner office and your Harvard MBA and your promises about the life you could give her." Julian straightened slightly, sensing victory. "But here's the thing about personal motivations," I continued. "They don't change facts. Mira still stole money, you still manipulated stock prices. The board still voted illegally on a merger designed to enrich management at shareholders' expense. I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing directly behind Julian's chair. So, yes, this is personal, but it's also justice. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get both at the same time. Julian twisted around to look at me. What happens now? Now you clean out your office, surrender your company property, and hope the SEC decides not to file criminal charges. And if I refuse? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. Then I released the hotel security footage of you and Mira. All 18 visits, complete with timestamps and audio. Julian's face went gray. You wouldn't. Try me. He didn't. 20 minutes later, I watched from the conference room window as Julian carried his cardboard boxes to a taxi. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a man who'd suddenly realized that all his advantages, his education, his connections, his charm, meant nothing when confronted with simple, documented truth. What about Mira? Chen asked. What about her? The SEC will want to make a deal, cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. That's between her and the government. And personally, your marriage? I thought about that question, about 8 years of shared dreams and growing apart, about trust broken and betrayals documented, about the woman I'd loved and the stranger she'd become. There is no marriage, I said. There hasn't been for months. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Pinnacle Dynamics executives arrested in securities fraud investigation. Below the headline was a photo of Mira in handcuffs, being led from a federal building. She looked older somehow, worn down by the weight of her choices. The company will survive this, I told the board, but it's going to require changes, new leadership, new policies, new commitment to actual corporate governance. And you'll be leading those changes? I'll be overseeing them, from a distance. I closed my laptop and stood up. Meeting adjourned. Chen, I'll want weekly reports on the transition. Webb, prepare a full financial audit going back 5 years. Everyone else, figure out how to run a company without stealing from it. As I walked toward the door, Chen called after me. Darren? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I paused at the doorway. The right thing would have been stopping this before it started. This was just the necessary thing. Outside, the reporters were still gathered, still shouting questions at anyone who entered or left the building. I took the service elevator to the parking garage and drove home through side streets, avoiding the media circus. My house felt different when I walked in. Quieter, emptier, but also cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my office, looking at the emails that had accumulated throughout the morning. Congratulations from business associates, interview requests from reporters, legal documents from attorneys representing various parties, and one message from an unknown sender with the subject line, "Thank you." I opened it. Mr. Halloway, you don't know me, but I worked at Pinnacle Dynamics until last year. I was laid off as part of cost-cutting measures, while executives gave themselves bonuses and stock options. Today I learned that those same executives were stealing from the company and manipulating stock prices. Thank you for exposing the truth. Thank you for proving that sometimes justice actually happens. Sincerely, Jennifer Martinez, former senior analyst. I read the message 3 times, then saved it in a folder labeled Why It Mattered. Because in the end, that's what this was about. Not revenge, not jealousy, not even justice in the abstract sense. It was about the difference between right and wrong, about the idea that actions have consequences, about the belief that truth, properly documented and strategically deployed, could still defeat corruption. My phone rang. Ravi. How does it feel to own a Fortune 500 company? He asked. Expensive, complicated, necessary. Any regrets? I thought about Mira, about Julian, about the board members who'd voted for an illegal merger because it seemed profitable. I thought about Jennifer Martinez and all the other employees who'd been sacrificed to executive greed. None, I said. Not one. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to prove that a company could be run honestly and still be profitable. Tonight, I was just going to sit in my quiet house and enjoy the silence. The war was over. I had won. 3 days after the arrests, I discovered that winning a corporate war was significantly more complicated than fighting one. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since the story broke. Reporters wanted interviews. Shareholders demanded explanations. Government agencies required documentation. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Mira's attorney kept calling about plea negotiations. I ignored most of it. Instead, I focused on the company. Pinnacle Dynamics needed new leadership, new policies, and new direction. The stock price had dropped 30% when news of the fraud broke, but it was already recovering as investors realized the company's fundamentals were sound once you removed the corruption. On Thursday morning, I drove to the federal courthouse for Mira's arraignment. Not because I wanted to see her, but because I needed to understand what the government's case looked like. The courtroom was packed with reporters, attorneys, and curious spectators. Mira sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back severely, her face pale but composed. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the institutional clothing and fluorescent lighting. The charges were read aloud: securities fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, violation of fiduciary duty. Each count carried potential prison time. Each count was supported by documentation I'd provided to the SEC. When the judge asked for her plea, Mira stood slowly. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Her voice was steady, professional, the same tone she'd used in board meetings and client presentations. Even facing federal charges, she was still performing. After the hearing, I waited outside the courthouse. Mira's attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Catherine Ross, approached me near the parking garage. "Mr. Halloway, I represent your wife." "Ex-wife. The divorce papers were filed yesterday." "I see. Well, I'd like to discuss a possible resolution to this matter." "What kind of resolution?" "My client is willing to cooperate fully with the government's investigation, provide testimony about other individuals who may have been involved in questionable activities." "Other individuals like Julian Firth?" "Among others." I leaned against my car and studied Ross's face. She was good at hiding her thoughts, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. Mira was looking for a way out, and she was willing to sacrifice anyone necessary to get it. "What's she offering?" "Complete cooperation, financial records, email communications, details about the merger negotiations, everything." "In exchange for?" "Reduced charges, minimum sentence, possibly house arrest instead of prison time." I thought about that. About Mira in her comfortable home instead of a federal prison. About Julian taking the fall for schemes they'd planned together. About justice deferred in the name of prosecutorial convenience. "No," I said. "Excuse me?" "No deal. She made her choices. She can live with the consequences." "Mr. Halloway, you should consider—" "I've considered everything. The answer is no." Ross's expression hardened. "You realize my client could implicate you in these activities?" "She could try." "You had access to all the same financial information. You could have stopped this at any time." "I did stop it. That's why we're here." "A prosecutor might see it differently." I smiled. "A prosecutor might, but a jury would see the evidence. They'd see that I documented everything, reported everything, and acted to protect shareholders instead of enriching myself. You destroyed your wife's career out of jealousy. I exposed criminal activity. The jealousy was just motivation." Ross studied me for a long moment. "What do you want?" "I want her to plead guilty to the charges she's actually guilty of. I want Julian to do the same. I want the money returned to the company and the shareholders. I want justice." And personally? Personally, I want her out of my life. That evening, I met Ravi for dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. We sat in a corner booth, away from other diners, and talked about the legal complexities of corporate fraud cases. The government's case is solid, Ravi said. Bank records, email evidence, recorded conversations. Mira's attorney is just fishing for a better deal. Will they offer one? Probably. Federal prosecutors like cooperation agreements. They make the cases easier to prosecute. And Julian? Julian's in worse shape. He was the senior executive. He initiated most of the questionable transactions. If anyone's going to prison, it's him. I cut my steak and thought about Julian in his expensive suits, his corner office, his condescending smile when he called people like me blue-collar adjacent. Good, I said. Darren? Yeah? Are you okay with all this? The arrests, the publicity, the divorce? I considered the question. 3 months ago, I'd been married to a woman I thought I knew, working quietly in the background while she built her career. Now I was the majority owner of a Fortune 500 company. My wife was facing federal charges, and my face was on the business pages of every major newspaper. I'm okay with the truth, I said finally. Whatever comes from that. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk, M. I showed it to Ravi. She's not supposed to contact you directly. I know. You should report this to her attorney. I should. But I didn't delete the message. Later that night, I sat in my home office and stared at Mira's text. We need to talk. 4 words that carried 8 years of history, months of betrayal, and the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. I typed back, nothing to discuss. The response came immediately. Please, 5 minutes. There are things you don't understand. I understand enough. The merger wasn't about money. It was about saving the company. I stared at that message for a long time. Even now, even facing federal charges, she was still trying to justify what she'd done, still trying to rewrite the narrative to make herself the hero instead of the villain. The company didn't need saving, I typed. It needed honest management. Julian had information about Titan Industries, about their plans for hostile takeover. So you decided to sell to them first? We decided to control the process instead of being victims of it. I almost laughed. Control the process. Corporate speak for theft and manipulation, dressed up in the language of strategic planning. By stealing money and manipulating stock prices. By positioning ourselves to protect shareholder value. Whose value? Yours and Julian's? A long pause. Then, I know how this looks. It looks like fraud, because it is fraud. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, because you chose it to. Another pause. Then, I loved you. I stared at those 3 words on my phone screen. Past tense, loved, not love, loved. I loved you too, I typed back. That's why this hurts so much. Can we meet? Just once? To say goodbye properly? I thought about it, about closure and forgiveness and the temptation to believe that 8 years of marriage deserved a better ending than federal charges and divorce papers. No, I typed. We said goodbye when you chose Julian over me. Everything else is just paperwork. I turned off my phone and poured myself a scotch. Outside, the city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds, beautiful and distant and cold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More legal proceedings, more media attention, more questions about the future of Pinnacle Dynamics. But tonight, I was finally free from the weight of other people's expectations, free from Mira's ambition, free from Julian's condescension, free from the pretense that success required sacrificing principles. I raised my glass to the empty room. To difficult decisions, I said aloud, and the courage to make them. Then I sat back in my chair and began planning the future of a company that would be run honestly, ethically, and profitably. Because sometimes, if you're very lucky, You get to rebuild something better from the ashes of what came before. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. 6 weeks after the arrests, the federal courthouse looked like a media circus. News vans lined the street, reporters clustered around the entrance, and photographers waited to capture the moment when Mira and Julian would learn their fate. I sat in the back row of the courtroom, watching as the judge reviewed the plea agreements. Both defendants had eventually accepted deals, Mira for 18 months minimum security, Julian for 3 years federal prison. The money would be returned to the company. The fraud would be acknowledged. Justice, of a sort, would be served. But that wasn't why I was here. I was here because Catherine Ross, Mira's attorney, had one final card to play. "Your Honor," she said, standing at the defendant's table, "before sentencing, my client would like the court to consider additional information about the circumstances surrounding these charges." The judge looked up from his papers. "What kind of additional information?" "Information suggesting that my client was not the primary architect of the fraud scheme, but rather a victim of manipulation by someone with greater access to corporate information and financial resources." I leaned forward in my seat. This was new. "My client has prepared a statement detailing how her estranged husband, Mr. Darren Halloway, used his position as a silent shareholder to orchestrate these events for personal gain." The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer Walsh, stood immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. This is the first we've heard of any such allegations." "Because we only recently uncovered the evidence," Ross replied smoothly. "Evidence showing that Mr. Halloway had advance knowledge of all the transactions in question and could have stopped them at any time." The judge frowned. "Ms. Ross, your client has already entered a guilty plea. Are you now claiming she was coerced?" "I'm claiming she was manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit her professional ambitions for his own purposes." I felt every eye in the courtroom turn toward me. Reporters were already typing on their phones, updating their stories with this unexpected twist. "Your Honor," Walsh said, "the government's investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing by Mr. Halloway. In fact, his cooperation was instrumental in exposing the fraud. Cooperation that came only after he'd allowed the fraud to continue for months," Ross countered. "Why would an honest shareholder wait so long to report criminal activity unless he was benefiting from it?" The judge looked directly at me. "Mr. Halloway, would you approach the bench?" I stood and walked down the aisle, conscious of the cameras following my movement. At the defendant's table, Mira watched me with an expression I couldn't read. "Mr. Halloway," the judge said, "these are serious allegations. Do you wish to respond?" "I do, Your Honor." "Proceed." I turned to face the courtroom, looking out at the reporters, the spectators, the cameras that would carry my words to news outlets across the country. "Your Honor, Mrs. Ross is correct about one thing. I did have advance knowledge of the fraudulent transactions. I knew about them because I commissioned an independent audit specifically to investigate suspicious financial activity." Ross started to interrupt, but the judge held up his hand. "I knew about the inflated consulting contracts because I traced the payments through multiple bank accounts. I knew about the stock manipulation because I analyzed trading patterns and compared them to insider communications. I knew about the illegal merger vote because I recorded it happening." The courtroom was completely silent. Mrs. Ross asks why I waited to report these activities. The answer is simple. Because I wanted to build an airtight case. Because I wanted to ensure that when the truth came out, there would be no room for doubt, no possibility of escape, no chance for the guilty parties to claim they were victims of circumstance. I looked directly at Mira. Mrs. Ross claims her client was manipulated, but the evidence shows that Mrs. Halloway initiated the fraudulent consulting contracts. She established the LLC used to funnel money from the company. She participated willingly in the merger conspiracy. "And Mr. Firth?" the judge asked. "Mr. Firth was equally culpable. The hotel records, the email communications, the financial transactions, all show a pattern of deliberate criminal activity undertaken for personal gain." Ross tried again. Your Honor, Mr. Halloway had a clear financial motive. Yes, I did, I interrupted. My motive was protecting my investment in a company that was being looted by corrupt executives. My motive was ensuring that shareholders received honest value for their ownership. My motive was proving that corporate fraud has consequences. The judge studied me for a long moment. Mr. Halloway, do you have any evidence to support your version of events? I have all the evidence, Your Honor. Bank records, email transcripts, recorded conversations, financial analyses. Everything I provided to the SEC, plus additional documentation I've prepared specifically for this hearing. I pulled a thick folder from my briefcase and handed it to the court clerk. This contains a complete timeline of the fraudulent activities, cross-referenced with communications between the defendants. It shows clearly who initiated each transaction, who approved each payment, and who benefited from each illegal action. Ross was looking increasingly desperate. Your Honor, this is clearly a vindictive ex-husband attempting to destroy his wife's credibility. No, I said quietly. This is a shareholder who discovered criminal activity and took appropriate action to stop it. The judge opened my folder and began reading. The courtroom waited in silence as he reviewed page after page of documentation. Finally, he looked up. Ms. Ross, I've reviewed Mr. Halloway's evidence. It appears to comprehensively document your client's voluntary participation in the activities she's pleaded guilty to. I see no basis for claims of coercion or manipulation. But, Your Honor, the plea agreements stand as negotiated. Mr. Halloway, thank you for your cooperation with this court. I nodded and returned to my seat as the judge proceeded with sentencing. Mira received her 18 months. Julian got his 3 years. Both were ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties. As the defendants were led away, Mira looked back at me one final time. In her eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before. Acknowledgement. Not of guilt, not of remorse, but of the simple fact that she had underestimated me completely. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me with questions. Mr. Halloway, how does it feel to see your wife sentenced to prison? She's my ex-wife, and she's being held accountable for her actions. Do you feel vindicated? I feel like justice was served. What's next for Pinnacle Dynamics? New leadership, new policies, and a commitment to running an honest business. And personally, what's next for you? I thought about that question, about the empty house waiting for me, about the company that needed rebuilding, about the future that was mine to shape. I'm going to do what I've always done, I said. Work hard, play by the rules, and prove that sometimes the good guys actually win. That evening, I sat in my home office with a glass of scotch and a stack of resumes from candidates for CEO of Pinnacle Dynamics. The company was mine now, completely and legally, and it needed someone who could lead it forward without the baggage of the previous administration. My phone buzzed with a text from Ravi. Saw the news coverage. Nice work in court today, I typed back, just telling the truth. How does it feel to be done with all this? I looked around my quiet office, at the awards on the walls, at the financial statements showing Pinnacle Dynamics improving performance, at the divorce decree that had been finalized that morning. It feels like the beginning, I typed, not the end. Because that's what this had always been about. Not revenge, not destruction, but reconstruction. Building something better from the ruins of what came before. Mira and Julian had seen the company as a resource to be exploited, a vehicle for personal enrichment regardless of the cost to others. They'd confused success with theft, ambition with corruption, leadership with manipulation. But a company was more than its executives. It was the employees who came to work every day, the shareholders who invested their savings, the customers who trusted its products and services. Those people deserved honest leadership, ethical management, and transparent operations. They deserved better than what Mira and Julian had given them, and now, finally, they were going to get it. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to the board of directors. Effective immediately, I am announcing my intention to serve as interim CEO of Pinnacle Dynamics while we conduct a search for permanent leadership. My priorities will be restoring investor confidence, implementing stronger governance procedures, and rebuilding our reputation as an ethical and profitable company. The age of backroom deals and self-serving executives is over. The age of honest business begins now. Respectfully, Darren Halloway, Chairman and CEO. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. Outside my window, the city lights sparkled in the darkness, beautiful and full of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to prove that a company could be successful without sacrificing its principles. Tonight, I was just going to sit in my quiet office and enjoy the satisfaction of a job well done. The proxy war was over, the real work was just beginning, and for the first time in months, I was looking forward to it.